Hello, everyone. I'm Kenneth Morefield, the owner and operator of artsandfaith.com, and I'm pleased to be joined today by Rebecca Miller, the director of the new Martin Scorsese film portrait, Mr. Scorsese, playing on Apple TV. Martin Scorsese currently has two films in the Arts and Faith Top 100 Spiritually Significant Films. The Silence, ranked at number three, and Last Temptation of Christ, ranked at number 73. So I appreciate, Rebecca, you taking the time to give us some insights into this fascinating man and his fascinating films.
Thank you.
I'd like to start by asking you a couple questions about process, and then time permitting, we may talk about one or two of the films. How is directing a film portrait different than directing a scripted narrative film, or is it?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, I think in many ways they're very similar in the sense that they're both just storytelling. Marty is my protagonist, and I'm telling a story where I want to engage the viewer and sort of, it's a kind of hypnosis, right? You're trying to keep people involved and interested and riveted. But the thing is about this about documentary is that you don't have the scaffolding of a script in the same way. So you might have a sense, of course, because I decided to basically, even though there are lots of discursions and formal kind of curly cues, it's still a linear film. It really is a film about a life, and
Mhm.
I wanted there to be a sort of sense of like this of uh cumulative force, like things causing other things in a life and also his
Mhm.
internal life. But still there's a lot of freedom in terms of how you cut and how you arrange scenes, which is wonderful and exhilarating.
So, with so much archival material to deal with, as well as the new interviews that you did you kind of have an outline of that story in your head before you did the interviews, or did you do the new interviews for the film and then let it grow organically?
Everything was really really the interviews that I did are really the backbone of the film.
Hmm.
They really were the beginning
Okay.
of everything, and everything came out of that. And then we started to look, we were looking for archival the whole time, but in terms of how, it's almost like, you know a, a spinal column and then the ribs and then the flesh and then the organs,
Hmm.
but that was the spinal cord, was the interviews.
So at one point, I think it's in episode one where you ask him a question about Taxi Driver, and I wrote down the response. He started to say something, and then he says, "There's an urge to answer immediately, but I have to be very careful because it's going to be taken the wrong way." And that just struck me as being having a subject that you're talking to who is so self-aware of the process and has done so many interviews. Did you ever get the feeling like he was making the portrait of what he wanted to say, or was he genuinely responsive to where you wanted to take the interviews?
I think he was genuinely responsive. What's
Hmm.
interesting is that although we cut away from him, he continues to speak in that moment, and
Mm.
he
Hmm.
he starts to talk about the loneliness, the
Yes.
alienation, the sense of not really being able to be a part of, so things socially, uh, and in a way, he answers the question. Like he sort
Well,
of
he
says, "You have to be
does, yes.
careful," and then he's like, he completely answers the question of his identification, the ways in which he was able to identify with Travis Bickle. I think that there's like a I think his biggest concern was not answering in ways that he had already answered. I think
Hmm.
that was his big concern, is not to just answer glibly. He wanted to actually think about things. And um, I think he was as honest as he could be, honestly.
Hmm. I noticed that in a number of places you left the questions, like the voice, your voice asking the question in. Um, we never actually see you, or I don't remember like seeing you. I'm assuming that's a conscious choice. Was there a reason why you leave the questions in at some points, Um,
Well, I thought it was only honest to say this
mhm.
is a conversation. I mean, after
Okay.
all, we talked for a long time. Also honest to say we have a relationship. It's one of the reasons that I have like a little moment where we talk, we banter in the beginning. I mean, we weren't deep friends yet at that point,
Hmm.
but we knew each other a bit, and there was a certain level of trust. And I also think that um sometimes there's humor conveyed, or he's responding to something I say with humor. So it's like I just it would have been weird to just have nothing there, and then what's he responding to, you know? So
Hmm.
I did weed myself out a lot, a huge amount, but I left in what I felt was necessary. We tried having, I was only shot in one interview, and we tried putting it in, and it was just like, who's that? It just
Hmm.
didn't work. And so I felt like the way to be in there was with my voice, but I felt like my image was just going to get in the way.
I think you're right. I think that there is a market difference now that you say it. I'm thinking back to the documentary of or the film portrait of a conversation versus an interview, and those being similar in form, but actually very different emotionally and tonally. And I think
Yeah.
one of them being that if you're in the shot, then we as the audience are watching an interview. Whereas if you're not, then he's having a conversation with us while he's having a conversation with
Yeah,
you.
that's very true. Yeah, I think
So,
that's
and
right.
and I definitely felt that. So we're particularly interested in arts and faith, obviously, about the Last Temptation film. And he says at one point, it's in, I think in episode four, but it might have been late in episode three, that he made Last Temptation because he, quote, wanted to get to know Jesus better. And uh, my wife, who is an artist, very much understands the idea of getting to know your subject matter through doing it. But me as a critic, I'm a little bit more like, well, what does that mean? How can you make a movie if you don't know your subject matter? Um, did that quote strike you? And can you talk as a director about like, did you get to know your subject better through making the film?
Oh, no question, I did. I didn't know that much about Marty when
Hmm.
I didn't know that much about his biography, his personal biography. I knew a lot about his films because I had studied them, watched them, prepared for these interviews. I knew all the films that were made at the same time as his films. I had a very good sense of the sort of film history around him, all those things. But in a way, I didn't know as much about his personal life. And in some ways, I think that was helpful, actually,
Hmm.
because I could just listen and actually genuinely ask questions.
Right. Can you share something that maybe you learned through the process of making it about him that was different than what you expected going in?
Well, I mean, I definitely I did not know that he would have considered himself addicted to drugs.
Uh-huh.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that he felt that his life essentially had been saved by Raging Bull, and how much De Niro had to do with
Hmm.
some of the, not only bringing him that project, but other projects. He was such a big part of that. Um,
Collaboration is a very big word in the film. It comes up a lot in the
Huge.
portrait.
And I didn't, and I didn't know I didn't really appreciate the level of collaboration and uh improvisation that were in the films. I
Mm,
didn't fully appreciate that either. There was
mm,
actually an immense amount that I learned and
right.
was surprised by.
Um, so at one point in talking about the response to Last Temptation, he says, I thought I would get a dialogue, or I thought a dialogue would happen, and instead I got yelled at. Um, and I was thinking about that quote a lot, and um, it seemed to me as a viewer, not knowing him, that there was still a level of um, pain at being the focus of so much intense, visceral, personal, not artistic, personal. Um, I don't know what other word to use, but hate. Uh,
Yeah.
does that ever go away? Can that ever be healed, or is
I
that something
mean,
that just stays with you forever?
I
if
think you're
someone
very,
just fundamentally responds so negatively to your work.
oh, I think it's hugely hurtful and baffling and just heartbreaking, really. And I don't think you ever quite um get over that.
Mm,
I mean, the wound heals, but the memory is still there of having been so vulnerable, in a way, being so extremely vulnerable to like put
mm,
your faith out and say, I'm on a quest and I'm trying to share my quest with you and talk about this amazing thing that Jesus is God and man at the same time. And what does that mean? And how does that
right.
look? And like just begotten completely. I mean, really like globally sort of excoriated. I think it was a shocker, but it didn't stop him from continuing on and continuing to tell the truth as he saw it and explore the things that, because that's his job,
Mm. There's a famous book out now called about trauma called The Body Keeps the Score, and there's
Mm,
a lot now about how even though you've dealt with the trauma, that the stresses and the changes that it happens just kind of lives on in your body or in your memory as well. So I definitely think that that's an act of courage to keep on going and
yeah,
to keep on exploring the same ideas or materials I mean, just the courage that it would take to go back to themes of faith in
yeah,
silence after having been so fundamentally misunderstood and
yeah,
judged,
yeah,
to say, okay, well, I tried that and it didn't work. So I'll just make a lot of money making gangster movies till the rest of my life and saying, no, I need to try again or keep going.
yeah. But that's a real artist,
Yes.
that's what he is.
So, well, those are all of the questions that I had for you today. So I appreciate your joining us. Are there any messages that you have about the film for viewers at Arts and Faith, particularly about people who might be approaching your film portrait or Martin Scorsese's work from a faith perspective?
Well, I think, what drew me probably to him was the fact that I knew that he was on a spiritual journey and yet was had some of these very violent films. And like I was thinking, like, how do these two things go together? Like, who is this one, how does one person contain, all of this?
Hmm.
And I think in many ways that's what the film is exploring
Hmm.
is and also what does it mean really to be a Christian and to be like asking those questions of yourself. And how is his work Christian? And I think that's really interesting.
I,
And
I
I
do
and I
too.
also, and I think that, somebody from one of I think maybe the Christian Science Monitor said she said, well, that she hadn't been able to finish Goodfellas, I think, and hadn't really been wanting to watch Taxi Driver. But then after she watched the documentary, she completed both films and she really liked them because she sort of had another insight. So I feel like if this film can bring people back to those things and have them look at them with through a slightly different lens,
Hmm.
I think that's good. I'd be happy about that.
Yeah, I wonder if there's a generational shift among Christian viewers as well. I think about the point in the film portrait where his mother responds to Mean Streets by going like, "Oh my gosh, that language was horrible," and uh, there's no question that she loves her son, but it's just a different generation where
Right, so for sure.
that kind of language makes them, and I think that I think that it's great that you're returning attention to the Christian themes in his work and helping an entire new generation of Christian viewers discover these works and discover a serious artist who is able to work within in the system to tell stories of faith, some of them hard
Yeah,
and R-rated, but very real and very personal.
exactly, exactly. And not to look away, like that's his message is don't look away from suffering and sin and complicated situations.
Okay, excellent last word. Don't look away.
Thank
So
you.
the series is called Mr. Scorsese. It's going on right now at Apple Plus. Rebecca Miller, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. Really good to meet you.